Joan was born in Domremy, France in 1412. Life was hard. It was the 100 Years' War. England and France were fighting for control. She was a peasant girl. This meant she worked the land. Joan was a devout Christian. She prayed often. When she was 13, something extraordinary happened. Joan started hearing voices. The voices belonged to saints. They told her to save France. Joan believed her visions were real. The saints chose her for a mission. She had to convince the Dauphin Charles to be crowned king. He was the rightful heir to the throne. Joan also had to drive the English out of France. This was a huge task for a young girl. But Joan was determined to obey the voices. Her faith gave her courage. Joan knew she had to act. She was only 16. She traveled to Vaucouleurs. This was a nearby town. She met the local garrison commander, Robert de Baudricourt. She told him about her visions. Baudricourt was skeptical at first, but Joan's conviction impressed him. He eventually agreed to help her. He gave her a small escort of soldiers. Joan journeyed to Chinon. This was where the Dauphin was. It was a dangerous journey, but Joan was determined. She finally met Charles. She told him about her mission. Charles was also doubtful at first. He tested her. He disguised himself as a courtier, but Joan saw through the disguise. She recognized him instantly. This convinced Charles that she was divinely guided. The siege of Orléans was a turning point in the war. The English had besieged the city. Orléans was strategically important. If it fell, the English could control the Loire Valley. This would be a disaster for France. Joan arrived at Orléans with French troops. The soldiers were inspired by her presence. They believed she was sent by God. Joan's arrival boosted the morale of the French troops. They fought with renewed vigor. Joan herself was a fearless warrior. She rallied the troops. She led them into battle. After 9 days, the French achieved a decisive victory. The siege was lifted. This was a major victory for France. It proved Joan's divine calling. It also marked her as a skilled military leader. After Orléans, Joan's fame spread. She was hailed as a hero. She was called the Maid of Orléans. Joan continued to lead French troops to victory. She urged Charles to go to Reims. This was the traditional site of French coronations. Reims was held by the English, but Joan believed it was essential for Charles to be crowned there. The French army marched on Reims. They captured the city. On July 17, 1429, Charles was crowned King Charles VII. Joan stood by his side. She had fulfilled her mission. The prophecy was complete. This was a moment of great triumph for Joan. Her visions had come true. She had saved France, or so it seemed. Section 5. Betrayal and Capture. Joan's Fall from Grace. Despite her victories, danger lurked. In 1430, Joan was captured. It happened during a skirmish with Burgundian forces. The Burgundians were allies of the English. They saw Joan as a threat. They were eager to capture her. Joan's capture was a blow to the French. Charles VII seemed indifferent to her fate. He made no effort to ransom her. Joan was sold to the English. They saw her as a valuable prisoner. They wanted to make an example of her. Joan was imprisoned in Compiègne. Then she was moved to Rouen. This was the seat of English power in France. The English were determined to put Joan on trial. They wanted to discredit her. They wanted to undermine Charles VII's legitimacy. Section 6. The trial begins. Charges of heresy and witchcraft. Joan's trial began in January 1431. It was a politically motivated trial. The English wanted to use it to their advantage. The charges against Joan were serious. She was accused of heresy and witchcraft. These were capital offences. The trial was held in Rouen. It was presided over by Bishop Pierre Cauchon. He was a pro-English cleric. The trial was a kangaroo court. Joan was interrogated relentlessly. She was denied legal counsel. The questions were designed to trap her. They focused on her visions. They wanted her to admit they were demonic. Joan remained defiant. She insisted her voices were from God. She refused to recant her claims. This only fueled the accusations against her. Section 7. A question of faith and fashion. The charges of cross-dressing. The charges against Joan were not just about religion. They also focused on her attire. Joan wore men's clothing. This was a major point of contention. During the trial, Joan defended her choice of clothing. She argued it was practical for a soldier. She also claimed it was a symbol of her divine mission. However, her explanations fell on deaf ears. In the 15th century, cross-dressing was considered taboo. It was seen as a transgression against God's natural order. The church had strict rules against it. Joan's insistence on wearing men's clothing was used against her. It was presented as evidence of her heresy. It reinforced the image of her as a heretic and a threat to societal norms. The trial transcripts reveal the judge's obsession with Joan's attire. They interrogated her repeatedly about it. This highlights the significance of clothing in medieval society. It also shows how it could be used to control and punish individuals, especially women. Section 8. Condemned by the Church, remembered by France. Despite a lack of evidence, Joan was found guilty. She was condemned as a heretic. This verdict was a foregone conclusion. Her fate was sealed. On May 30th, 1431, Joan was taken to the old marketplace in Rouen. A large crowd gathered to witness the execution. Joan was tied to a stake. A pyre of wood was piled around her. As the flames rose, Joan prayed. She maintained her innocence until the very end. Her death shocked many. It sparked outrage and resentment towards the English. Joan's execution backfired on her accusers. Instead of discrediting her, it made her a martyr. Her story spread. She became a symbol of French resistance. Section 9. Vindication and Sainthood, Joan of Arc's enduring legacy. Years later, Joan's case was reviewed. In 1455, Pope Calixtus III ordered a new trial. This time, Joan was exonerated. The charges against her were declared unjust. She was cleared of all wrongdoing. Joan's name was finally cleared, but her legacy continued to evolve. In 1920, she was canonized by the Catholic Church. She became St. Joan of Arc. Today, Joan of Arc is a national heroine in France. She is a symbol of courage, faith, and unwavering spirit. Her story continues to inspire people around the world. Joan's life was short but impactful. She left an indelible mark on history. She's remembered as a young woman who dared to challenge authority and fight for her beliefs. Her legacy continues to be debated and celebrated centuries later.